All of our files are free and will remain free. If you like the show, you can show support by donating $1 to help with expenses. Just use the PayPal link on our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. Thanks.
And welcome back to part 2 of this program today, where we're examining what we could call the spooky aspects of COVID-19. I guess it should come with a warning label. If you have weak nerves, don't listen to this. Okay, so I guess we should just pick up where we left off.
Sure.
And you were trying to tell me about this anti-malaria combined with antibiotic drug that has shown very promising results in terms of medicinating infected people. In fact, 100% cure, although of course the sample groups are very small, so that doesn't mean too much, but still 100% is promising.
Yeah.
So, want to take it from there?
Sure. So you probably all have seen Trump talk about hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine. And Fauci, the guy who is the little guy with the gray hair, right? Mm. He's the one who folds his arms.
Reminds me of an Italian mafioso.
Yeah. He's always sneering and saying it's not approved yet. And, Trump shouldn't be saying that. Mm. And you always wonder what's going on in the background. Why is he saying that? If it's curing these people and these people are all dying, why is he? What motive would he have? So a lot of people think he's got money somehow invested with the Bill Gates Foundation and this global fund. You may be familiar with Amazing Polly on the YouTube, and that's their thesis is that this global fund put this kind of war criminal Tedros into the head of the WHO. And they're releasing viruses and looking the other way when these weapons are being used, and it's quite an involved thing. Mm. And I tend to come at it at a different angle. I look at things that were developed in their lab, in Fauci's lab, under Fauci's control, and under the people at Fort Detrick, and for other diseases, and then look at if they took a financial interest in those things. In a financial interest that's especially a hidden financial interest, an undisclosed financial interest, a lot of times I believe leads to the motive. So if you remember in our first part, we talked about this glycoprotein 120, and normally that'd be a technical thing you'd never have to remember. GP 120 is this shorthand way of saying it. But Dr. Fauci took out all these patents on glycoprotein 120. At the same time that all of these glycoprotein 120 genes are appearing for the first time in the coronavirus. Now, I find that very odd. And you can Google Fauci, GP 120, and patent, and you will see the 4 patents he has. Now, normally, you wouldn't go out of your way. He's been working in AIDS for 30 years, 35 years. You wouldn't go out of your way to patent something after the fact, 30 years later, unless you may have had foreknowledge that it was going to be needed soon.
So he patented this 30 years ago?
No, he's been working with it for 30 years, but he patented it just in 2016-17 timeframe, and just received the patent in 2018. So that's not good. But when you then look at another guy on that same stage, which is this Dr. Redfield, who is sort of looks like C. Everett Koop. I don't know if you remember our Surgeon General, our colorful Surgeon General, but he has sort of a kind of an Amish beard, a gray beard, bald guy. Right. I don't know if you, he's up there too. Well, he worked with Dr. Fauci on AIDS drugs going back to 1992. He was under investigation by the U.S. Army for running private trials and not telling the FDA about private trials.
Jesus. So he's a proven Frankenstein.
Right. but it gets better because he was running those trials for glycoprotein 160. Well, it turns out glycoprotein 160 is the precursor to glycoprotein 120. And it creates glycoprotein 120 and glycoprotein 41. Well, both of those just happen to be in the coronavirus as well. So now you've got a 2 for 2. So the third oddity is that there's this malarial drug that's been around for 30 years. And it's a relative of hydroxychloroquine, and it's called, I believe it's tafenoquine, Tafeno quin. And what these things tend to be is the quine on the end puts them all in usually the same drug family. And they've been modified slightly in the lab for one reason or another. You may want them to have more of a not to cause upset stomach, so you put a buffer in the drug, or you may want them to work better with children, and so you weaken it a little bit, or you may want to change the molecule because it causes certain side effects. So they modify the molecule and then they change the name just slightly. So this was an anti-malaria drug, just like hydroxychloroquine and chloroquine, tafenoquine. Well, all of a sudden, 30 years later, again, it looks like Fauci and Redfield and so forth are involved in this patenting again. There is this gentleman who also works there at Fort Detrick, who also was in. I don't know if that noise is going to be.
Yeah, there is a noise there.
Yeah, let me restate after the noise gets over. So there also is a drug company that these guys are involved in with these actors at Fort Detrick. So it's this Dr. Bavari also has this sort of history. He had the 4 different startups at the University of Nebraska we talked about, with students going back and forth to Wuhan. But then there's also this other company called Nordic Bavari.
It doesn't sound good.
Well,
Bavaria.
I tell you. Yeah, exactly. It's the combination you didn't want. It's the Nazis you didn't want coming to Vermont, you know.
And I'm just waiting for you to say that Bayer is involved somehow. Beer.
Well, you have a real gem in Sweden, which is Carl Bildt.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
And Mr. NATO there.
Yeah, we know him.
Yeah, and so in making Sweden a NATO country, it seems like the only thing he ever thinks about. But so that is interesting that they're taking this drug that's been out for a long time for treating malaria, and now they're bringing that out. And this Nordic Bavari company looks like a combination of Sina Bavari, who has the 4 startups in Nebraska, and also this other gentleman by the name of, I don't know how you say it, Jens, Jens. It's like a Scandinavian male name, Jens.
Oh, Jens, yes.
Jens, okay, Jens Kuhn, Kuhn. Kuhn, yeah, Kuhn. Well, it turns out he ran for a long time. He worked for this company named Battelle in Columbus, Ohio, which I was chasing because they were doing nuclear diversion, selling Iran nuclear technology. Again, Bavari is an Iranian, so that's scary. And then this Jens guy ran Russia's biosafety lab 4. So again, you would think he would be, he's written all these books about bioweapons, not defense, right? He worked at a Russian bioweapons lab. He also somehow became involved in the health ministry of Congo, sort of like the neighboring country of Ethiopia.
That's where Ebola broke out, isn't it?
Just a couple of days ago. As soon as Trump cut the funding for WHO, the next day, WHO declares a pandemic in Ebola.
No, like recently?
Yes.
I haven't heard about this.
Yes. In the next day after Trump cut the funding. They declared a pandemic in Ebola.
Crazy.
In Congo.
Lunatics, because Ebola, if that ever was weaponized, we would, for the contagiousness, like we're seeing for the corona, we are done. That's 50% lethality, man.
Yeah. Well, and I have done some research of his speeches, Bavari's speeches. This is this Nordic Bavari company. All the pictures in their literature, by the way, are not Bavaria. They're all in Scandinavia, up by you. But all he talks about is Ebola, 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 Ebola. Now, if you follow the progression here, is you could have, let's say, combination bullets here. Coronavirus, all you care about that, like your doctor guest said, that's just for vectoring. That's just for aerosolizing. That's just for a transmissibility. You can put anything you want in the payload.
Jeez.
So you start with, maybe HIV, but then you have Ebola. We actually had an Ebola type organism here on this island, Cobb Island in Maryland, where one person lost their life and the other person's leg was, almost eaten.
Yeah, but wasn't that the one coming from Africa, from Congo?
That case was not Ebola, but it was Ebola-like.
Okay.
But this, if 2015 with Ebola, I believe.
Yeah.
We had a guy.
That's the one I was referring to. Yeah.
Maybe it was 2013, but anyway, The student came back from the university, Columbia University, and he went to Methodist Hospital. My son was a doctor at the hospital at that time. It's the reason why I remember. But but they contained him when he got back.
They did contain it, and they did an exemplary work containing it in Africa too, because the real threat was if it would break loose in Nigeria, it would be all over the world, but Nigeria managed to contain it. Now,
sure.
I'm asking you, do you know if this recent outbreak is the classical Ebola, or is there any indications that this may be a new strain? Don't know.
It's so new.
Because this could be the bastard child of Corona and Ebola.
Yes, absolutely. And I hate to say it, but these bioweapons, somehow the outbreaks are always very near the richest uranium mines in Congo. They're somehow always near silver mines. They're always near gold mines, or vast.
Well, what's the potential significance of that?
Well, if I have a tribe that's in the wrong place, right,
of course,
and then we had 3 different outbreaks of cholera, if you remember, in Ethiopia that Dr. Tedros of the World Health Organization managed to miss each time. He called it watery diarrhea each time, but each one of those, they were taking different parts of neighboring countries of Ethiopia. So Somalia in particular, where they're doing a lot of drilling for oil and gas and also minerals as well. So this whole history here seems to share a lot with a very famous family that we have in America named Strzok family that wanted to take Trump down with a dossier in 2016.
Oh, they were involved in that fake operation. That was a major failure.
Yes, a failure. But this could have been the insurance policy. We don't know, but we know that the CIA has used bioweapons frequently. And
in the spy world, they also use it.
In the spy world, especially in Africa where it's not going to be noticed, not going to be reported. The Middle East where it's not going to be reported. Mark Mazzetti of the New York Times reports that chemical weapons were used by ISIS 77 times in Iraq. But, who cares? It's over there.
Just for the record, all the 3 times Syria was blamed, the Syrian government was blamed for chemical weapons, all 3 times has been proven in the aftermath was the so-called rebels. But, the Al-Qaeda. ISIS.
Well, and those stores, those chemical weapons stores, came directly from of the captured chemical weapons, U.S. made chemical weapons from Gaddafi. and they were transported over there. So, in our series, I've been doing this for 3.5 years, and we follow the agency that manages the movements of these things, called the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, which Peter Strzok was a part of. And it just seems to be these dark weapons move always. Their hand always seems to be on the movement of this material, and it always seems to get diverted to Africa. It's supposed to be used in Afghanistan, but somehow it gets diverted to Africa or Eastern Europe. It should be used in the Middle East, but somehow it gets diverted to Africa and Haiti. And it just surprises you.
Always these poor countries who have poor development of control and reporting these things. It's like the dark back alley of the world where they can run havoc with people that even also independent of this would regard as, subhuman. Not that I think they have any higher regard of the rest of us.
Right,
These crazy bastards. But they are Mengeles, Frankensteins, and people need to wake up to this enormous threat that both chemical and bioweapons pose to the world. It's not just an exotic war far away that doesn't concern you. You see today how much this concerns you. And even if we can't take on yellow vests right now and go out in the streets, everyone who listens to this, I implore you to engage somehow, some way in this.
Yeah.
If nothing else, spread this show and alert people to what's going on. Because if we're not waking up to this, we can't stop them. They're doing whatever they like with no repercussion, no oversight, no penalty.
Yeah, it's true. And I agree with you wholeheartedly that the best way to stop it is to add light, to show light, because I can't remember who said, just shine a light and the darkness disappears by itself. I found that to be true over and over again. If you just shine a light on these things, it's the best. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. And it is because it is a dark corner of the world where nobody has, especially in these remote villages, has cell phones or cameras or anything to record a lot of this. I just happen to have a year and a half in a very immigrant neighborhood in Washington, D.C. from Africa, from this belt of Africa. So I was talking to these drivers, Lyft drivers and so forth, coming from these countries, fleeing from these countries, or who had parents back in these countries, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Djibouti, the places where there was breakouts with Guinea and Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire, and Burkina Faso, and these countries that were directly affected, Gabon, by the Ebola and the other outbreaks. And it's very much, when you get into the details, it looks like a bioweapon. We have the top scientists the top legal scientist in the world who wrote the biosafety law for America, Francis Boyle. He's the guy who prosecuted Slobodan Milosevic. He says bioweapon, bioweapon, bioweapon. So you have to look at these experts and you have to give them some credence that they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and like I said in part one, if the Chinese and Russia official says it, you should... fair enough, you don't want to put much stock in what the official says, but then it's irrational to put more stock in what, for example, the American official says. Right, yeah. Is there anyone who has a track record of manipulating the public? It is the American officials. Libya, Syria, Iraq. Especially when they have an interest, they have a financial interest, and you can show the financial interest. That's when it's this Jens Kuhn is a very interesting person. Having worked at this company named Battelle and then gone to, there's another interesting foundation called Geneva, the Geneva Foundation, that they seem to be using to move money around. And we're going to be looking more at that. But if you remember the impeachment, a lot of the people that were involved in the impeachment, the Vindmans, the Colonels, twins, and some of the other people. What about this Schiff? I've heard he's been enrolled in the Epstein network. Yeah, well, we have actually IP addresses from devices they've owned, and we have Schiff talking to Strzok throughout the impeachment. And then there's these three kind of weapons brokers, these three Russian weapons brokers that they present as
people that were ratting on Trump, but in actual fact, they are also communicating with Schiff and Strzok. So there's a lot of contrary evidence under the surface that we present in our series. So it just bears more sunlight. It needs more daylight to see what's really going on.
Not only that, but people like you who report on these things need also to be known, because that's your best protection, because you're really delving into stuff that can get you killed.
Right.
So the more people hear you speak about these things, the less, then they will have to do an Assange or something if they really want to take a journalist like you down. But again, that's a little better than just finishing you off in the darkness, you know. Or what a coincidence. He got a viral infection and...
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to be very careful, George.
Yeah. And I've had an incident with my family already with this. So it was very scary, but my child is better now. But I did have somebody who did advise the State Department, who did work with the Strzoks in the military, in several of these countries like Eritrea and Djibouti, Camp Lemonnier there, where there's a very large military presence that most people don't know about. And he was from Norfolk, Virginia, where most of these covert weapons operations occurred.
CIA too, isn't Langley North Virginia?
Yeah, Norfolk, Virginia, and that's where all the General Grange shipped all the weapons for Libya, for Syria, Sudan, Yemen, etc. And I did get the veiled threat, which is, well, I don't know if it's a veiled threat. We're going to Jonestown your family. We're going to Waco your family.
Okay, overt threats.
Yeah, well, overt threat, yeah. And then, I'm 5 minutes away sitting on the phone. And I think it was to try to see if I would shake or be afraid or whatever. And it's just enough murky that Jonestown your family, Jonestown with James, with all these people. And Waco.
That's where the expression Kool-Aid comes from. Drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. Drink the Kool-Aid. And then, of course, Waco, and then mentioning flamethrowers in the next sentence.
Jeez.
So but I think that's the initial thing. And if you keep going, like you say, you end up having a kind of immunity, because then if you get taken out, it only gives credence to your reporting.
Exactly.
Yeah, and makes you a martyr.
Exactly. Yeah. It has to be like a public takedown.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's worse.
Yeah. So if I get sick, I'll call you back.
Yeah. But if there is... okay, let me put it this way. I remember some years ago in the techno genre, there was this viral hit, pun intended, from an Italian DJ.
Yeah.
And to my amazement, he's involved here too. Can you go a little into that part of the story?
Yes, I can. Did you come about that story outside of my reporting, or
no,
through?
It's from you. It's from you.
Okay, yeah. Well, there's this family,
and he had a huge hit a few years ago.
Just 1 second.
Yeah,
it's okay. Okay, hold on. Hope we can edit this out.
Yeah, we'll fix it. But I'm glad you have guardians anyway.
Yeah.
So the family. Yeah, it was a huge hit a few years ago. So I was pretty intrigued and amused that there's a connection there.
well, yeah. So, and now we don't think. I don't know if that means Nazi, which means a good Nazi.
Yeah.
But anyway, the first patient of the coronavirus, we believe through various sources. Yeah. So the Nazis are interesting because they are a sports family who happened to be in Wuhan during this outbreak. They're in Wuhan competing as athletes in these military games. And if you look at all the studies from the various people that doing the gene sequencing and so forth and the epidemiology, they say it either broke out in Wuhan at the end of October or early November from a large gathering. This is the epidemiology. This is just doing sticks and pins and then showing the spread to all the different countries, all 150 different countries. It had to be a mass gathering where everybody then got on a plane and then simultaneously left. And the only event that fits that bill is these World Military Games that were there. There was 250.
Oh my God, military games. There's always drills. When there's a false flag, black op, something like that, they always have these drills going parallel. That's like one of the traits, according to Dr. Oh, what's his name again? The expert in false flags. I totally blank on his name, but people listening knows.
You mean in Norway? Ole Damegard?
No, he's American. I just forget his name right now. He's like he analyzed 9/11, everything. What's his name? Anyway, that's just a red flag for me.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of
military drill.
Yeah, sure.
Go on.
Yeah, well, there's these military games, and everyone, there's 10,000 athletes, but there's 250,000 volunteers.
Wow. So
this is interesting. So it fits the bill. So I thought, well, I'll look into these a little bit better because there's two of them there. And I looked into her resume, and he's of NATO. Now, that's pretty high up. That's as high as you get. And we had a Allied commander in 2016 named James Jones that was using a robot software to create sort of cheer bots for your candidate. It was called ShadowNet. And James Jones had used, his company had gotten the rights to this and was using it to create bots in the 2016 election. So it just was strange that he worked for him. These games are put on by NATO, and NATO had put in as many athletes as they possibly could to these games. Well, I started looking at the name, and he ended up working at Fort Belvoir and also happened to be working in the hospital. And I thought that was interesting. He's an intelligence operative, top career for the Supreme Allied Commander, but also working in the hospital. And I thought that's odd. It seems like a place where you could go to see if people are sick or not and test positive for an antigen, but it doesn't seem like a place where she should be if she's over at Fort Belvoir. Well, anyway, Fort Belvoir here in Virginia is the head of the Intelligence Command. That's where all of our intelligence services report back into. That's the same place all these IP addresses from Schiff and Strzok and these three Russian, Ukrainian arms brokers, that's where they all kind of track back to. So it seemed like this was the testing arm, if you will, for Fort Detrick. Fort Detrick was sort of the research and development. Fort Belvoir is sort of the testing and deployment, the operationalizing of this thing, right? So I did a little more checking just to make sure that I wasn't going down a rabbit hole. And I went into WikiLeaks and looked for this name. And I find all kinds of NATO couriers. And then this other name is the head of the armories. So they have what's called a National Armament Director. And that's the person who has the sway over the chemical weapons, the biological weapons, and nuclear weapons. And I'm like, wow, that's a coincidence. There's another. Well, then I started looking at the epidemiological studies, and a lot of it goes to Iran. And these Iranian prisoners get infected. A lot of it goes to Milan. There's a huge area.
Milan. Yeah, right.
Yeah, Milan. There's a huge area in the Chinese section of Milan. I didn't know this, but because of the sweatshops in China and the owners in Milan, about 20% of Milan now is fashion. The fashion district is Chinese, and all these Chinese went back and forth for the uniforms of the athletes. So then I started thinking, wow, were they infected at the games? And then it all came back, and the reason why Italy is the hot spot because they were somehow sprayed or something, or just there was something going on at the closing ceremonies or in practicing for the closing ceremonies. And then all these Iranians also were affected. And I thought, well, Iran's our sworn enemy, death to Israel, all these things, So I thought there's a person we had put them at that time on the terrorist nation list. So I just look at these, again, facts, looking at the maps, and then just saying, hey, more more needs to be answered here. But
Yeah.
to cap it all off, was this, and he's the DJ for Madonna, and so is his another relative also DJs for Madonna, and they just happen to be doing these concerts all over the place in the hot spots where we've had the big breakouts in America. And I thought, oh my God, I hope they're not spraying something at the concerts. You know, that would just be the worst.
But that's a perfect way if you want something out. Concerts, parties.
Again, a large group. Well, then, I mean, I say, well, this can't be any more coincidental. This can't have any connection to the dossier, the Trump dossier. There can be no, I mean, I would really have to strain. Well, I said, well, let's just take one of their DJs. So we took the top DJ, and her name's, she's an international model, beautiful, but she's at all these same events. Well, it turns out that the guy who is sending his private armies, from Ukraine to all these different mass protests in China, is somebody she works for, and that's this guy named Kolomoyskyi. He's this guy.
Hang on, I didn't even know. So China doesn't use their own riot police; they import what you call it, private military. What's that called? Mercenaries from Ukraine.
Yes. So remember
But those are Nazis, right? Those are the Nazi people.
Yes, these are the Nazi people. These are the blood and soil people. These are the Webb people.
They fought in Syria too, right?
Yeah, these are the what do you call it? The Pravi sector. So this guy Kolomoyskyi is the same guy who bankrolled the takedown of Trump, right? He's the one who wants Crimea back. He's the one who has all these different airlines. He has all these different television companies. He's the one who kind of put Zelensky in as the Ukrainian prime minister, right? That guy, He's the one who keeps getting the $17 billion from IMF every 2 years, and he has this private bank, and we keep losing the money, and we keep giving him $1.7 billion in USAID that he loses every 2 years, and so it's just this.
So we're talking like a Ukrainian version of Blackwater.
Yes, that's exactly Ukrainian version of Blackwater. He's got 4 different armies that I know of: Dnieper 1, 2, and 3, and then Azov. Well, I say, okay, she works for him. That's fine. But maybe it's a PR thing. But then her husband is the guy who did the dossier when Strzok offshored the dossier to this crime unit in Kiev. It was called the Nabu Crime Unit. That was run by a guy named Leshchenko. So she's married to Leshchenko, the guy who was doing all the dossiers on the Trump family and the travel schedule of the Trump family during the last takedown. I said, oh my God, it's all the same people that are doing this takedown, only it's bioweapons now. Maybe it's just a psychological operation and it's not that bad a bioweapon, but there has to be some kind of component there. Look at it. I mean, shut down the world here. So it just was amazing how quickly, even just looking at only one DJ, how quickly, and the connection there is he was put out as the first victim in Milan. So
technically, this could have been spread involuntarily by these people.
Yeah, let's take Hong Kong for instance. I think it was the first of the year, right around there. All of a sudden, when the World Health Organization and China come out and say it's spreading, at the end of the year was when World Health Organization.
Huge protests in Hong Kong, right?
Huge protests at that time. Now the Azov Brigade, Kolomoyskyi's Azov Brigade, is there, supposedly protesting along with their brothers in China. Why are they there? It just seems like they're there for no good reason. Where do they get the plane tickets? Kolomoyskyi has this airline.
How on earth did they get access? Entrance?
Yeah. How would they get in?
Normal people having trouble getting in.
Yeah. And what were they even protesting other than the Chinese government, So they're paid mercenaries. And the same group was used during the Maidan. And they had snipers. They shot people on both sides. They shot 20 police officers. They shot 40 protesters. And it created a huge like we have now, huge disturbance so that now somebody else can be brought in to quell the unrest and take over.
Shock doctrine.
Yeah. So I just found it amazing connections between the Trump dossier and this this public patient zero. And that's a lot of for one story.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But like I said, if you want to look at it with goodwill, it could also be then spread without them being aware. There's a scenario for that too, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a scenario. But when you look at Carl Bildt, and you look at Carl Bildt, his days,
huge Swedish oligarch, if people don't know, one of the few handful of players that runs Sweden,
and really wants Sweden to be in NATO, and was in charge of using a lot of very nasty weapons of war in both Bosnia and Yugoslavia, and bringing in mercenaries.
And to give context, Sweden is one of the few Western countries who hasn't joined NATO.
Right.
And NATO, there's a Nazi lair, if ever there was one.
Yes.
Direct ties to how it originated, and also when it comes to the military aspect of NATO, it's been this Nazi philosophy all the time.
Sure.
You know, the scandals with stay behind troops.
Yeah.
I forgot the name of the operation, but up until the 90s and the 2000s, there was these Nazi networks that were the military branch of NATO. So it's not just poetic, it's not just derogatory use of the term when we call it Nazi. Right. It's historic ties.
Well, the Gladio operation.
Gladio, there you go, Operation Gladio. Yeah.
Was certainly the stay behind armies and caching weapons and so forth.
Yeah.
And if you look at Madeleine Albright, her father was involved. This Joseph Corbel, for the stay behind armies all in East. It's just the same group of people, and it's just hard to. The Strucks kind of get their start toward the end there in Bosnia, in Kosovo. So, and Peter Strzok's father has the same history with, flying groups in and flying mercenaries in. And so it is sort of this dark weapons crew. And that's really where my story tends to focus on, and pulling all these threads together.
But what do you say to those who say, well, because, they can't just fathom that people do these things. So they say, well, I believe it's like a natural mutation. And because they really believe that okay, so everything is a conspiracy. Everything is warfare. Are there never any natural mutations? I mean, they do believe every destructive modern virus is natural.
Yeah.
And so this is what they tend to believe about this too. Is there any, how can we make them aware?
Well, if you think about it, a chemical weapon, like in Syria, leaves behind all these residues, so it's man-made. So you have a lot of explaining to do in investigations that need to be done in the case of Syria and Ghouta, as well as Aleppo.
Which is why they rush to blame the Syrian government before there's any professional investigation, because then they can't use it politically.
But a bioweapon, the advantage of it is it has that deniability, where you can immediately call anybody who says it's a bioweapon a conspiracy theorist, and then you can keep using your bioweapon. It's the beauty of the bioweapon. So that's why we have to go to the genome and go to the genomic studies and talk about these probabilities and how improbable it would be that a virus goes for 58 years and all of a sudden has three new HIV genes. It's just hard to believe. And the fact that Fauci and Redfield are putting in patents at the same time for exactly those genes is just a little bit beyond more than suspicious. Yeah. So I think if you cry wolf all the time and cry conspiracy all the time, it does wear on people after a while. But if you're selective and really do the digging and collect the evidence and say, hey, I just want an ear here to listen to the evidence, I think that's better. Unfortunately, there's so many different, folks out there with so many different theories. That's why I try to build bridges to people who are more scientists, mathematicians, et cetera, that are closer to these studies in scientific literature.
Yeah, that's clever. And I like your style. You always substantiate your argumentation, references. That's important. Yep. But there was a friend of mine, he told me the other day that I'm so beating myself up for not writing down the name. You may have mentioned him already for all I know, but there's this American who's got millions of dollars cooperating with the Chinese about bioweapon. Oh,
you mean Hunter Biden or?
No, I didn't know. Is Hunter Biden involved in bioweapons? I didn't know.
Well, no, but there is this kind of murky transfer of $1.5 billion with the China nuclear group. And what typically happens in these programs is you make a deal for nuclear, and nuclear is the thing that is above the board, but then there's a bio and chemical component below the board. The three go together. Wow. So I'm not saying that that's a bioweapons deal, but that's where I would start looking, because it is with a state-run Chinese government entity, and it is in the nuclear triad. The triad is nuclear, chemical, and biological. Now, there may be a whole bunch of other transactions. I'm just saying that's the first place I would start looking.
Bill Gates has been deeply involved in vaccines.
Sure.
And whatever people think of vaccines, it's not necessarily a dichotomy. I mean, we should really, if we talk about vaccines, we should talk about specific vaccines, because some work wonders and some do more harm than good. And for the latter, Bill Gates was involved in India, and it was a huge failure because it really accelerated the disease, and it went as far as the Indian government banning this vaccine program. It just collapsed in a huge scandal. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's ties to that oligarch too. Do you know anything about that?
So Gates I was familiar with Fauci pushing that. It was the measles, I believe, the measles vaccine. So there's a lot of I'm not as versed there other with Gates being thrown out. I'm familiar with that whole story, but
no ties to Gates and Wuhan Corona.
Yeah, well, there's this Pirbright Foundation, PIRBRIGHT. It appears to have a connection with the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust is a group out of sort of a MI6 type cutout group in London. And they respond to a lot of these viruses. A lot of the biosafety labs are Pirbright biosafety labs in the London area. There's also a company by the name of Port and Down that does a lot of joint ventures with DynCorp, a guy named Steve Feinberg. And I've been reporting on that for DynCorp for 3.5 years and talking about how they've been doing these bioweapons. They were also in Kosovo and also in Bosnia.
Under the guise of doing bioprotection? Is that how it works?
Yeah. Well, even back then, it was bioweapons straight out.
Okay.
I mean, where you spray, they had an operation called Sea Spray before DynCorp. I don't think ran this one, but they actually sprayed the city of San Francisco on a foggy day to see what kind of with a bacteria, not a virus, but but they actually sprayed port cities in England as well, and I believe Portsmouth, which is the head base of the English Navy. Port and Down did, and Port and Down was also the folks that are involved in the poisonings that you were talking about of the Russians, where the Novichok product is made there with that biosafety lab. And then the journalist about 8 years ago, the Russian that was poisoned. Yeah. So they're also the ones that did the confirmation testing in Aleppo and Ghouta for determining who did it, basically. So there's just this kind of running theme between the biosafety labs in the UK and the biosafety labs, especially the leadership in the United States. Christopher Steele was very involved in the bioweapons program. with Russia and bringing Russian bioscientists and like this Kuhn guy, Jens Kuhn, when the Soviet Union collapsed, kind of transplanting the bioweapons talent to England. So there is this potential opportunity. I'm not pointing any fingers here, but creating your own virus and then creating a vaccine at the same time, much like computer virus writers create the virus and then the vaccine.
Yeah, that's known.
And this welcome trust, again, seems to be the one that picks up the pieces when these outbreaks happen, especially in Africa. And it just so happens there was another that wrote the World Health Organization response document, the blueprint document. Another, and the other person who wrote it for the U.S. was Sina Bavari, this Iranian guy from Fort Detrick. And so when I see those kind of names pop up immediately right under Tedros, who is a war criminal in Africa using chemical weapons and looking the other way when they were used, I tend to say, I see the running thread here. It's a rogue operation within Five Eyes, within some NATO, some U.S., some others that are making deals with Russia and China to do these kind of operations, virus vaccine type operations.
So if we expect a vaccine to come out, this will be the most profitable vaccine in world history because they say that everybody will get COVID-19 sooner or later. So who do you think we should look to as, because I think those who issue the vaccine will be those with most blood on their hands, to put it like that.
Yeah.
So who do you think that will be?
Well, there's a very interesting timeline with Dr. Fauci because he's informed on the 7th of January about the vaccine, about the Wuhan virus. And then on the 10th or the 11th, he approves 3 trials for vaccines. The first one was a small biotech startup in Silicon Valley called Moderna. Their actual stock symbol is mRNA, which is the same letters in messenger RNA that what the virus uses to transmit its vaccine. So Moderna is one. Johnson & Johnson is another one. The third one is Sanofi out of France. And the fourth one, which they didn't list, but which was running a silent vaccine, and that's the one I always look to as the one that's going to be the winner. The one they don't tell you about is Eli Lilly. But it's interesting how they go ahead and run trials for vaccines in 4 days. Wouldn't you ever hear the pharmaceutical companies moving that quickly in 4 days? And they don't tell Trump about it until January the 29th through a memo that Trump is supposed to somehow osmotically know what's in the memo, because the aides that are supposed to tell him about that, hey, this could be a big deal, just basically say, hey, there's something happening in China. And that's when Trump does the travel ban. So they wait almost 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks to tell Trump after they've started trials. But I think the winner will be Johnson & Johnson, and I think the winner will be Eli Lilly for the vaccine.
But how do they end up? You mentioned that they were against using the malaria malaria drug, and combined with an antibiotic drug. I forget their Latin names. But would that be because these are so effective that they can undermine potential profit from a vaccine? What other motives could they have for trying to dismiss or play down the effectiveness of these drugs? Certainly not the side effects, because I never care about that anyway, ever.
Right. Well, that's exactly why I think Fauci has such stiff body language when Trump talks about hydroxychloroquine. If he thought chloroquine-based drugs were such a bad idea, why is he off on the side trying to get a patent for a tafenoquine, right, which is an analog, homologous drug to hydroxychloroquine? Why would he be getting these patents for glycoprotein 120 and glycoprotein 160 as an HIV if he wasn't aware that there was these genes in the genome. He only would have been able to see the genome one day, right? And it just so happens a year before he patented those same genes, and it just so happens a year later they showed up in this thing in the coronavirus for the first time in 58 years. So there's a lot of coincidences here that Fauci's going to have to answer. Just a lot of.
If we ever can put the spotlight on him for this.
Yeah,
right now he's held up like some kind of hero by the mainstream media.
Yeah, I think that's dwindling because he's on the board with Gates, as you know. A lot of the people that are surrounding him have this interest with Gates, and they're using the charitable aspects of this, unfortunately, in order to excuse not doing safety testing. And this is how the thing, I think, happened in India, where it gets spread, and you kind of want to shake the country of India down for a whole bunch of money, and the politicians are wringing their hands. So many people are dying, and so they go ahead with a vaccine that hasn't been tested, which goes ahead and and makes it worse. But they've given all the money already for the vaccine, so the robbers have left and gone, and so they don't really care if they're thrown out of the country. And that seems to be the same kind of shakedown here potentially. That's happening.
Well, where are they going to flee to this time? It's the whole world.
Yeah, and if you have the right people writing the scripts, you can position yourself as the hero. Dr. Fauci certainly has done that with AIDS for 30 years. So we'll see what ends up coming from that. I think there's some if we get it this time with a vaccine, let's say that's rushed through trials, and let's say it does work. I don't think we're out of the woods. I think we're going to see a new variant every flu season from here on in.
Right.
And that's
like this is going to be the new flu.
Yeah.
Some mutation of COVID.
This is the new normal, and unless we get at this network and shed some light on this dark network that comes up with these Gladio programs and these Odessa, weapons networks, unless we get at that network, it's going to keep happening. It's sort of like the banks are going to keep getting robbed if we let the purple gang have their hideout on the other side of the tracks. They're gonna keep doing it if it works.
So ironic. You said the Odessa network. There's also another Odessa network that has been in history. We call it the Bormann Reich, Martin Bormann's cartel corporation.
Same network. I'm referring to that network.
Oh, you were referring to that. I thought you were referring to Ukraine.
Well, it is, but if you look at how the diaspora of Nazis went, a lot of them did go to Ukraine because a lot of the Jews that were collaborators in Germany had to flee as well. Right. And they set up shop in Odessa as far as having a warm water port. And what do you do with all the weapons you've cached from all the different battles?
Exactly.
What do you do with? Yeah. So that was the place where the weapons got cached as well, near a port.
Yeah. The reason I think it's important to emphasize a little of the history and also the Nazi aspect here is because the Nazis are the perfect boogeyman that the conditioned masses have no problem imagining that philosophy being involved. They have a problem imagining our current rulers are involved. So if we can show a link, a tie to the classical boogeyman, to the modern real boogeyman, then they will kind of get it. You see what I mean?
Yeah. I think that's exactly a lot of these paperclip scientists were given new identities and so forth. And it's uncanny how they're in all of our defense industries. Yeah. There's a Jeff Bezos's grandfather, the guy who runs Amazon, and who is the biggest beneficiary of this shutdown, stay at home, than Amazon. But his father, the grandfather, was named Geis and ran the paperclip operation for not only the Navy Affairs Center that I'm looking right at for development of these different submarine missiles, but also for the Atomic Energy Commission.
Wow.
Running that. So if you dig down a couple of generations, you see how all these people that are now billionaires here didn't really start in their garage, with a $10,000 loan from their uncle.
Yeah.
They may have had that loan from their uncle, but they had a lot more than $10,000.
Yeah.
So it's just very interesting when you follow this. And the one network that most people are very surprised by is the Bormann Brotherhood in Isfahan. Isfahan in Iran is where Peter Strzok's father worked at the Bell Helicopter Factory, where there's a huge American enclave of weapons war technology.
Wow.
And so, it's just one of those things, the Bormann Brotherhood of Isfahan, who knew?
Yeah.
But the Nazis wanted a pipeline into the Middle East, just like the Americans did with the Saudi Arabians. But the Nazis chose to go to Baghdad and also Iran. And there was this Tehran to Berlin railway and a Baghdad to Berlin railway. And FDR cut it off with King Saud, the Baghdad railway. But that's when the chips went over, the Bormann went over toward Tehran. So there's some history here that's worth looking at.
Absolutely. This is gold. Now, again, not to scare people, but there are other interesting things, like the guy who coined the term quantitative easing. His name is, he's British or German maybe, Richard Werner. Mm-hmm. He spoke of how the Central Bank of England has, and this is like overt, has this, they want to issue, first off, they want to have blockchain money replace cash, centralized control by the central banks, and then issue out UBI, which obviously the economic crash will force. No matter what people think of UBI, we've been spoken warmly about it here. We've examined it from different sides, but we've made sure also to see the positive aspect of it. But here's a negative aspect, and that's that in order to qualify for the UBI, which will be numbers in a computer, obviously, you have to have, and this is straight out of like old time conspiracy theory, the religious nutcase conspiracy theory. You have to have the mark of the beast, a microchip implanted into you. Now, this is in the open. Huh. And also accept taking vaccines. I don't see the connection at all, but I do see it now in the post-corona times. They can get, because you get people chasing other people down for being outside or not keeping up with the social distancing. People are turning fascist in attitude now because of you're talking about psychological warfare, scaremongering. Oh, how dare you? Oh, you haven't taken the vaccine. Lynch him. I can easily see that sentiment being exploited so that suddenly it's logical that you have to take a vaccine. Again, money. And money being then numbers in a computer. Oh, you're a dissident. We just delete whatever number is in your account. That's like the really dystopian 1984 meet Brave New World scenario.
Yeah, well, there's some support for that. I mean, Gates is obviously pushing for forced vaccination here in America, and also we have the quantum dot, either the chip that he's proposed or the quantum dot, which is like a tattoo, but it can be picked up by an electronic device. So there is that kind of, everyone remembers the Jewish death camp numbering system. So it is very reminiscent of that. So it is happening. I mean, it's almost conspiracy theorists are being like verified every day in the news. This is happening, and we've followed this company of all the different electronic currencies. We followed this company that these MI6 guys got out of Russia, which is this Rostec. And this Ross group had Kalashnikov and all the war industries in Russia, and they're kind of now joint venturing with Christopher Steele and those guys. But they have this currency called Waves, WAVES, in Malta, and it's completely anonymous, can't trace it, and it's also you can enforce contracts. So it's not just me sending you money. It's I can have a whole weapons contract. I can do a whole Manhattan Project for Iran in nuclear or in bioweapons, and it has compartmentalization. So I can have many vendors that can't see the rest of the contract in blockchain. And so those are the people. Those are the types of constructs that I look at for doing a Libya or a Syria or a Sudan or any other kind of big covert operation. And so it makes sense. The next step for them would say you have to use our money. And this whole cashless society and the digital dollar that Nancy Pelosi's pushing, it's happening. It's no longer conspiracy theory. It's happening. I don't know what else to say.
And obviously, if the officials, if the government support it, it's not because they want some kind of decentralized, competition-based currency where there's no insight. I mean, it's the opposite.
Sure.
Even if you argue from a legitimate perspective, like, oh, we have to avoid. We have to tax them, avoid tax exemptions, whatever, right? So obviously it's not going to be, because today we have a lot of crypto coins that supposedly, I don't know, are private and encrypted, and so there's a decentralization and there's competition, but they want like one global currency that is fully controlled by the central banks and by proxy the governments, which is a huge difference from, having a Bitcoin here and another kind of coin there.
Yeah, I mean, you can pass a law that says all the coins have to go through a central exchange, just like the gold laws, and then use the network itself to root out the network. So it's a very dystopian scenario, but like I said, it's no longer a scenario. It's like unfolding one an hour,
in front of our eyes. Yes,
right in front of our eyes. So it again, I say the choice is you have to go at their network, or they're going to come at you and your network of friends and family. And really, you have no choice now that you're at home. Information is the only thing you can do. You can't even go protest anymore. So hopefully you get this broadcast out, and we'll do another show, and
if we get it out and if it can stay out, we'll see.
We'll see.
I'll ask you soon about yours, but I have a couple of more tidbits. I want to say first, the way they are doing vaccines and other kind of pharmacy products to earn money, people need to realize. Obviously, everybody knows big pharma is a boogeyman, but you have to understand that it's a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and anything they can earn money on, money is it's always been number one. It beats even ideology. It beats everything.
Yeah, sure.
There's so many conspiracy nuts who thinks it's like, oh, you have to dress up in satanic garments, you have to be a pedophile, you have to this, that, fit any, you have to be a Jew, you have to fit any kind of like this easy, cartoonish thing, but it always boils down to money. Yeah. That's the real driving force behind all collusions, corruptions, criminalities.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there isn't some ceremony in Malta where everybody dresses up as a knight or a stinky robe or whatever. And they can do whatever they want to make themselves feel like they're doing God's will. But at the end of the day, you're right. They check their bank accounts right after they're done with the stinky robe ceremony. It's just a palliative, I think, to get them to not convince themselves that they're not doing it for money. When you overthrow Gaddafi and it just happened to be $60 billion of assets that we acquire off book.
Exactly.
It's not because you're trying to stop terrorism. It's because you're trying to become insanely wealthy.
And like the pedophilia thing, well, that's how they get a file on you. That's why so many in the elite are involved in this, because it's the perfect control mechanism when you have something like that on your CV. A final point here for me on this is, if people wonder, well, why are all these bastards assigning to run Like, what's his name? Fauci, the Italian mobster guy.
Fauci, yeah.
Behind Trump. Fauci, yeah.
Yeah.
Why are bastards like that, who are guilty, ending up being in the outlets who are supposed to help and protect us? Oh, that's too much for me to accept. Well, just look at any other facet of government, especially in America. You have anti-environmental people running the environmental agencies. You have anti-public school people running public school environments, etc. I'm not saying I support like the Department of Education or whatever. I'm just saying you have, in all instances, you have this corruption where the worst people are ascending to top in the very agencies where they are supposed to, or departments where they're supposed to do the opposite. So why would it be any different when we're talking about this aspect of government?
Yeah. And if you look at the agencies they create, they go from administration to administration. Yeah. So they're fixtures. This PEPFAR was created, a presidential program to eradicate AIDS. When you're Trump and you come into the White House and there's PEPFAR, and this is the people advising you about what's been happening with AIDS for the last 30 years, do you throw them out of the White House, or do you say, well, Tony, you can be here, I'll come in for a briefing whenever I need to? And there's no need to talk to Tony. So there's no need to vet Tony, right? Until worldwide outbreak, until Tony makes it important to talk to Tony, and then they're ready to go with their whole stick up on stage. And I think Trump's presidency has been one of those after another, just one of those after another, where it's the 25th Amendment trying to throw him out, or they're trying to throw him out with all the different meetings in the Trump campaign with all the different Russians and setting them up just left and right.
Yeah, Russia Gate, Ukraine Gate, he grabbed them by the pussy gate. But the thing with Trump is that, honestly, and I have MAGA guys among my audience, and they don't like it when I criticize him, but I say get real. You can't worship one person blindly. You have to be critical. You have to deliver your criticism fairly around, and I'm going to do that now.
Well, feel free.
Yeah. I regard Trump as less informed than people like Obama, let's say. I think Obama knew much more what was going on in the dark corners of governing. But that said, I don't think he's on board with many of these things. That's why they want to get rid of him, because yes, he is uninformed and uninterested in many things. To have, and no president, to be fair, can know everything anyway. Right. But he's never been a part of this network, this elite of oligarchs, and that's basically the main reason they want to get rid of him. He's a loose cannon in their eyes. Yep. And then enter Biden. He's the perfect candidate, because not only is he demented and gonna die soon anyway, but he's also always been on board, a player, one who wants to ascend and lick the backs of them to get up. So he knows how to play the game, and he will be the perfect candidate, because he won't be, if Trump is uninformed, Biden won't have resources to be informed. Maybe in his heyday, yes, but now he's going to be like the ultimate figurehead. Yeah. Just a demented old guy who can rest on his laurels, while the agency craziness in America will just run havoc. There will be like a lot of independent small mafia bosses who all are tied together with the deep state and deep finance and the oligarchs, and probably all the way down to the Bormann Brotherhood. So that's why he will be the perfect president for them, in my view.
Okay. Well, it remains to be seen if there's going to be any kind of campaign this year at all, any kind of public meetings. There's some conspiracy theorists that say the reason why 50 is the maximum after they relax the restrictions. 50 is the maximum that are going to be allowed to get together in any public place. Right. Is because that's the maximum amount of people Joe Biden can draw if he goes to any particular. So I've heard that joke in America. So maybe that's it. Maybe this is the first total piped in campaign in American history. Yeah. which is way the Peter Strzok's of the world want it. That's the ultimate insurance policy. So, I am the same way. I mean, the reason why I was hopeful for Obama and voted for him twice was because I knew he was a CIA brat. I knew he knew who was the good guys and who were the bad guys, as far as especially diverting money and weapons and drugs and all that with Brennan and all those guys from Pakistan. And I thought he was going to help maybe change things from the inside, but he didn't have any power, hardly any power. So he kind of migrated over toward civil rights and the Obamacare, and that was his thing. He didn't have any. He didn't invade Syria. Was the one time he dug his feet into the.
He actually stopped that.
Yeah, but Trump is not a detail guy. But what Trump does well is read the crowd and read political opinion. He's very in tune with that, and he knows how to strike. He knows how to let the other guy go just long enough that he's going a little too far, and then Trump cuts him at the knees with the counterpunch, and so he's a political genius in that sense.
Instinctively.
Yeah, very instinctive, and I think Trump would even say that. And it's amazing because Trump does have that X factor that you're talking about that they hate, the unpredictability, that he can say a name who's doing some bad things. Like I was following a guy named Imran Awan, who worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz, was doing all this hanky-panky on Capitol Hill. He can say Pakistani mystery man in front of Putin. And then all of a sudden everybody's Googling Pakistani mystery man, 100 million people all over the world.
Right.
And that is the X factor that the unknown quantity that they hate about Trump, that they never have to worry about Biden. Biden will always say, I'm in Philadelphia when he's in Baltimore, it's never going to hurt anybody. It's never going to cause any investigation.
Exactly. His X factor is just his dementia.
Yeah. It's like, where am I today? So he's not going to lead any investigations. So.
No. And also the other aspects with Trump that they hate, that actually inadvertently could benefit us, the public, and that's that he has some degree of narcissism, meaning that he is crazy enough to go to war, figuratively speaking, with people who are powerful if they pisses him off enough. Like, he's not very friendly with Jeff Bezos, for example.
No.
And so a ball player wouldn't do that because they have the wits to know who they're really serving. So someone like Trump may actually, I say inadvertently, the MAGA guy thinks he's the saint and gonna save the world against the deep state. I don't buy into a second this QAnon stuff, because it's just have a long history of failing in predictions and analysis. But still, there is some kind of, because Obama was a huge populism in how he ran. Mm-hmm. He said the right things. He did the right. He was better than Bernie. He's
very good. Yeah.
Bernie is a populist in contents, but Obama was a populist in how he run. Now, Trump is yes, he's an oligarch like the rest. Yes, he gives them huge tax incentives, and he knows to inflate the Pentagon budget and stuff. But the weakness in their eyes with Trump is that precisely what you said. He knows how to read a room, and he cares about reading a room. Yeah. If he has narcissistic traits, he wants that feedback. So he actually cares that he's not going to go down as a very like Bush, like a very unpopular president. And that means he has the ear of the public if the pressure is strong enough, in a way that we never would see with a Biden or a Bush or an Obama. And that means that, unfortunately, many of the MAGA guys are completely cultists and don't want to criticize him. But if they have a line in the sand that can't be crossed, and Trump is pressured or voluntarily crosses it, he can be brought back by receiving enormous pressure on that. He will care and listen because, after all, he is a television game host, game show host.
Reality show.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that type of being in touch with people. Bringing a whole bunch of people that into a kind of focus group and asking them, how am I doing today, type of thing.
Or just a Twitter storm would make it.
Or Twitter, yeah. But he always seems to hit the right chord with his tweets. Sometimes not so much during the campaign, but now he seems to just say the one fact that just kind of is the little pin that blows up the narrative of Adam Schiff. He'll work up this big balloon, and then Trump will wait till it gets really big. Used to do this with kids who would blow up a bubble gum, and then somebody come along and pop it. It'd be all over their face. Yeah. And that happened to Adam Schiff so many times. I think they just got tired of it, and they said, we can't do another election cycle like this. We're just going to look bad again, and we have to just take away the idea of election. I mean, I really, and it's little statements like, we've tried everything else. Now should we do the insurance policy right toward the final days of the election? What does that mean? Was Fauci ready with this? 10 days before Trump takes office, Fauci goes up and talks about PEPFAR and how he goes all the way back to Reagan and how he almost got fired. The FDA wanted to fire him for running these private sidetrack trials with military and prisoners and other countries and all this stuff.
Yeah, because he started under Reagan, didn't he? He go far back.
Reagan, but his patriarch is George Bush. I mean, from the beginning, George Bush was the guy who CIA. Put him in there. Yeah. So, and then AIDS comes up right as Tony Fauci comes up. His whole career has been on this AIDS thing. So, every once in a while, Trump will keep people in place. Like he'll retweet somebody who says fire Fauci. And then all of a sudden Fauci will come to the podium next time and just gush about Trump, because he's like, oh, hey, wait, I could get fired here and I'm not going to be in control if I get fired. So he does have this way of keeping people in line or getting rid of them. Look how many people he's fired. He's just gotten rid of so many people.
Yeah, but he started that before he was a president.
Yeah. That's exactly true. Yeah, he's good at it. So
plus, if you're gonna, I think he's good at two things. I want to give him more credit because first credit is, like you said, he's a natural, instinctive populist, or should say. He can read a room, feel a crowd. The second is that he knows how to play a hierarchy. Hitler did the same. Unlike the very clear hierarchy of the Soviet Union, you had in that bureaucracy, Hitler made sure to, the number two power, until Bormann seized everything, of course, at the end, was always playing these small chiefs against each other. One day the Goebbels was on top, the other day Goering's department ruled, third day Himmler had control, and so you keep them on your toes, infighting, which is, if you're a paranoid dictator, you don't want the number twos to come together and topple you, right?
Right.
kind of I think a little of that is going on too.
Yeah, I agree with you. Taylor always used to talk about the 7 guys sitting around the kitchen table that took over Germany, and those were the 7 guys you were just talking about. And there is a kind of a Snow White and the 7 Dwarves quality to the cabinet, if you think about it. And anytime Fauci gets a little too uppity, he retweets a Fire Fauci tweet. So it's going to be interesting how they're going to do the election. We had one little trial of voting in Wisconsin. We had one little protest in Lansing, Michigan. And people are always surprised to say, well, why were you following Bernie in 2015, 2016? Well, Trump really wasn't on the scene before really 2016. I mean, he campaigned a little bit. But I wanted to go with a guy who was going to these places like Detroit. I grew up in Indiana in an automobile a big part of the supply chain was our town. And we had a very large business go out of business. It was called International Harvester. And I saw the effects of all that. And I was looking for a candidate who was talking about jobs in America. And Bernie had one statement that he said, which is, what does GE say? What does the new CEO of GE say when he has 5 words to choose? China, 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 China. You know, and none of those had anything to do with the United States. So Bernie was a populist as far as revitalizing these Rust Belt cities. And Trump came in and saw that. Now, Trump was more building on the coasts. You know, that's where he's done all his building. Chicago was a new thing for him.
But he's used to dealing with the mafia from New York.
Oh, big time. You have to. Yeah, Tony Salerno and you got to get cement. If you don't go through the mafia, you're not going to get cement. If you don't get the cement, you don't get the foundation, you don't get the building. So you got to go through the mafia. But what I'm saying is he co-opted he saw how Bernie's message was taking, and he picked that up beautifully and started becoming a manufacturing guy, and he started going to these plants, and that was really brilliant. And that's what Trump...
and he's doing the same now, because right now, after the establishment of the Dems managed to crush the Bernie movement, and I blame a little of this on Bernie too, because unlike Trump, he doesn't have the balls to go against the power.
Right.
He was actually more brave in 2016 than he was now. Now he was towing the line to a nauseating degree. But anyway, so look at how Trump has captured that crush, because Trump doesn't even need the Bernie guys to vote for him. All he needs is for them not to vote for Biden.
Right.
And he will go on for 4 more years. And he knows this. He understands this. So he's been saying truths. And honestly, Trump is an excellent liar. He lies very many times, like all of those establishment Washington people do. But here he takes truths and use them to his benefit. Like he said about, what was it? He tweeted out that, I forgot, but something about what the Dems did to the Bernie campaign. So and he's always been reluctant to overtly criticize Bernie that much.
Right.
And he really plays on getting them. So I think it will be 4 more years with Trump, and that's why I think it's very important that you MAGA guys who listen, that you tweet at Trump. And not just Trump. I mean, this is much bigger than one man anyway. But people have to wake up and they have to coalesce despite left wing, right wing, whatever, because it's about our survival.
Great.
So I think we need a popular uprising, at least online, since we can't do it physically, against these dirty, dirty forces who are playing with Mother Nature like they're doing when it comes to viruses.
Yeah, very good summation.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to do the show again see what happens in a month.
No, hang on. We're not complete. We have to now discuss you a little.
Oh, okay. I wanted to cut off before that happened. Okay. We'll do the vetting now. Okay.
Yeah. Because, and also I want, people to know where they can find you, because you're going to be unknown to many people. But let's start with the claims, because any true soothsayer like yourself will get trolls and detractors. And people who, he's a spy, he's an asset, whatnot. How do you address these kind of unhinged accusations?
Well, I'm not saying I haven't received information from people that were in the intelligence services, and a lot of them kind of go back and forth between military and then diplomatic and then the intelligence services. So, you have to have those contacts, and I did have some contacts with some of the Mossad folks, especially in Europe, because Mossad isn't organized like you think it is. They're not all sitting on computers like NSA in Fort Meade. They're not all sitting in Ben Gurion University in the middle of Israel on computers.
So they're still operating in an old school way then?
Yeah, I mean, you want to be in the ports. You want to have your port agents. You want to have your diplomats. You want to have your journalists as covers. You want to have a network out there with eyes and ears. That's the idea of an intelligence service, all the intelligence services, so that you know that you're getting your leaders the best information, right? So those people are very good sources of what's actually happening. When you're trying to follow John Podesta's artwork that he's selling, and you get pictures of him sitting in a boardroom meeting where he's brokering off artwork, and they're telling, you're getting information that says the free port of Geneva is where he has his art stored. There's no way I would know that unless there's some art dealers and antique dealers in Europe that would be giving me that information. So I'm not saying I didn't get information from them about Eric Braverman being safe, about Eric Braverman being held briefly. He was the head of the Clinton Foundation that disappeared for a while.
No.
There's no way I would know Eric Braverman was living on a kibbutz with Mark Zuckerberg's half brother near Tel Aviv without that, for instance.
What do you make of? Sorry, but I just have to ask. I just remember I've heard you talk about Seth Rich. I think he is because we all know it was never a hack. That's bullshit, and that's been proven bullshit. It's a leak, and Assange has to stick to his guns because, and to the detriment of his own health, he cannot out the leaker because WikiLeaks, all the thousands of cases they have broken, never been proved wrong, always protected their sources, but. Like George Galloway say, because he is in the loop of who it was, he says, I can't say who it is because then I would have to kill you, he says to his listeners.
Right.
So, but I think it is Seth Rich. What do you think?
Well, I did too. I went to Washington. I went to his house. I went to the house he had before, the one he had up in Bloomington Heights. I walked it. I walked the 50 minutes that he supposedly was on the phone at 2:30 in the morning. I went and knocked on the doors of the neighbors. I talked to the police officer, the public information, Rod Wheeler.
Jeez, wow.
We interviewed him. So what I saw with the Seth Rich case was I went to the hospital, both MedStar and the other hospital that there was reports of him showing up at, and everywhere I turned there was no evidence. There was no footprint. And normally when there is a murder and an unsolved murder in a robbery, you go house to house and you talk to people and you say, do you remember hearing anything? Mm-hmm. And you knock on doors, and that's just standard procedure. I was working at that time with she was remote at that time before she joined me in Washington, but she was a police officer, and you go house to house and you see if there's witnesses. They didn't do that. And they didn't, when it was publicized in the paper, it was one street away for where they had the yellow tape and the EMS vehicle, which looks very staged. That's just not how news happens. When you have somebody that high profile come into a hospital, people remember that. Okay. Howard, I went down to Howard Hospital as well. Nobody knew anything. I went to Joe's Bar and Grill. Lou's Bar and Grill, owned by Capone. And I sat in that bar 5 days talking to the different bartenders. Wow. And they all gave you different stories. So the only one consistent story was a very tall, thin black guy, dark-skinned black guy that resembled a lot this guy named Alpha Jallo, put him into a cab. That was the one consistent thing. But even Joe Capone told me 3 different stories about where he was that night. So when I see these inconsistencies, I think, is this just what I call a reality winner? Is this somebody that when they're trying to cover up the real whistleblower, whatever happened to him, that they bring this guy in as the kid every mother loves? And I switched. I changed from Seth Rich being the hero to being the reality winner.
The
plant that comes in and acts and takes all the credit for being the whistleblower, but it's not.
Like Oswald, what do you call it? You have an expression in English, not a dupe. Oswald said, "I'm just
you call it patsy. I'm not
patsy.
A patsy. Yeah.
So you think he's like a patsy?
I don't think he's a patsy. I think it's someone. Let's say I was going to fake a death. And I just wanted somebody to disappear. Let's say I had a broker who was doing bioweapons and a courier going around. Let's say Seth Rich. Seth Rich had a whole area of his background that people didn't know about in energy. He knew Warren Buffett very well. He was in Nebraska. He worked for an energy guy named Scott Klebe. Scott Klebe was very involved in energy, very involved in hiring these groups to block the Dakota Access Pipeline. The pipeline that went across Canada and then came down, the XL pipeline. And then who knew that secretly Dick Cheney and friends and Foster Friess and others were building the hypotenuse of the pipeline through the Dakota. And as soon as that teed in, then Seth Rich dies. It seemed like it was kind of like he was very involved in this, and he was very involved in company.
So there may actually be completely different sinister reasons for why he died.
Well, I think he was done with his project, which was to stop the XL pipeline and there in Nebraska. And if you remember, there was some water rights and some Indian rights and a couple of other things that stopped
protests.
that. Yeah, and then the Dakota Access Pipeline, which is cuts the corner basically across Canada to those shale fields, came in. Right. He was also involved in this Resources for the Future with Bill Clinton and a lot of very high level people. I'm not saying he's Mark Rich's son, but I'm not saying he's not.
Wow.
And that changes everything, because then you go, well, who is the real whistleblower, and what were they laundering through the Democratic National Committee? And there's a long history here with taking money that's been gotten through these covert weapons operations, taking over countries and so forth, and you have all this money that you have no way of laundering. A political party is the best way of laundering it, and then you launder it back out into your network, your advertising agencies and so forth, and it's mainly laundered through advertising PR firms and producers of political ads and so forth. And you basically use the money to put the people that you want in power, who are going to vote for more covert operations when they win. And it's just a self-sustaining cycle. So I've done a lot on the Seth Rich thing, and as soon as I see some evidence, why does the FBI, for instance, seize his phone and his computer? If it's just a robbery, why go grab somebody's phone and computer? Doesn't make sense.
Well, the obvious answer would be because he is the leaker, you know?
Right, but it also could be that he's a courier, you know? I mean, and then now we can't look at that. You know, now that information has been sealed. Why did Robert Mueller say that he was not the person who was the leak in the Mueller report? If you look at
hang on, did Mueller say Seth Rich was not the leak?
I believe so. Said that was.
Then he inadvertently admits it's a leak, which goes against the bullshit story in media.
Right, inadvertently, yes. He confirms that it's a leak. Yeah. But interestingly enough, this goes back to Norway and Julian Assange, because
Sweden. He was set up by two assets. One of them regretted. You know, if you're referring to the rape cases.
No. I'm referring to when he was when he was given the Bradley Manning phone. He was in Iceland.
Oh, okay.
And he was with this guy named Domscheit. And Domscheit is talking to Bradley Manning about the leaks. You know, remember Collateral Murder and all those State Department leaks. And they're about ready to get on a plane. And the way they set up Assange is they acted like they were going to seize Domscheit, and Domscheit gives the phone to Assange. And once you now go back and look at it, you'll see that this did happen. And anyway, on that phone, he's saying, "Hey, you keep the contact with this guy who's down in Iraq, okay?" And there's a Jabber account on the phone called the Berlin Chaos Computer Club. It's just a general Jabber account, but the person who had the Berlin Chaos Computer Club was Domscheit. Domscheit later then started another competitor to WikiLeaks that didn't go anywhere. I can't remember what he called it. But anyway, Assange has it for a couple of days, and he goes to Oslo and he meets the independent journalists in Oslo. And then Domscheit's released and comes back and meets Julian Assange a couple days later. And that's supposedly the period where Julian Assange writes these cryptic messages to Bradley Manning saying, a curious eye never dries in my experience. He's trying not See, and that's where I say that Strzok and Christopher Steele were trying to draw Assange. This is back in 2010. They're trying to draw Assange into a conspiracy. They're trying to have Julian Assange say, well, I got a rainbow table and I'll help you figure out the hash to get the password to the Windows server, etc. They want him to enter into a conspiracy. Well, the Seth Rich thing seems to just be a replay of what they did with Bradley Manning.
Right.
I'm here, I'm in at the DNC, I'm rooting around, and they're wanting Assange to then say, well, hey, have you tried this? Have you tried that? Which sets up Assange. And Assange never falls for it. He's always kind of dancing around
Very
it.
consistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's clever.
So anyway, I realize that's maybe a two wild tangents there, but they're interesting tangents because Julian Assange, this is going to be his defense, and the FBI person came out and confirmed this. If you read the FBI agent's report, in the last one that was done, they confirmed the Jabber account. It was Domscheid's phone. Assange had the phone for only a small, brief period of communication with Manning, etc. So anyway, I would be bringing this up in his defense.
This is a huge story. This is a show in itself, I realize.
Yeah, we'll come back and that'll be our teaser for the next show.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Let's go delve into that later.
Okay.
Now, have you committed any writing? Books or at least articles and stuff, or do you keep to video reporting?
I did a blog for a long time called No More Informants, but it kept getting hacked, and so I stopped doing it. Is it still out there, or? I don't think so. No, the URL doesn't work anymore. It just kept getting redirected to porn, and I'm like, oh god. But I wrote it for a long time, but it was all on these subjects. And then I did write a book about my dad.
That's right.
But that's not anything to do with this. And so I tend to think the problem I have with books, and I talk to authors about this a lot, is first of all, the average number of sales of a book when you go to write a book is 500. You sell 500.
More expenses than income. That's true.
Yep, you sell 500 books. And I can go out and do a video and get 20,000 or 30,000, and the one video, 500,000 views. And it's immediate. I'm covering things that happened this morning, right? And the book has this kind of stale, especially now the news moves so fast. And then I'm sort of writing it page at a time per video episode. I'm going to sit down and write a book and summarize it all, maybe in a documentary type of thing or a book. But just not yet. So it's just George Webb video channel right now, a YouTube channel.
So how do you work around the reference problem when it's orally, when it's live documentary? I mean, you, as an investigative journalist, it's very important to let people verify all this stuff.
Right.
And even though you can say, well, it is there through the info, most people are too lazy. So it's always easier with links and stuff.
Right. Yeah, it is easier with links. And so I do that. But then I also go back and curate my stuff later on with all the comments and so forth. And people say, well, you need to check this, check that. And then I actually go reproduce the video. I take the same video, but then I'll actually take the articles and it'll come up translucently. So I'm actually looking through the article that I'm talking about when I'm talking. And so you can see the headline at least. And then if it's a real important passage in the article, I'll bring it up.
Right.
And so I'm editing it down. So people at least get the feeling that I can't do that live, obviously. But at least they get the feeling that I'm doing that for all the videos, and I'm going to do that for every video. So I keep the best comments, and I keep all the links, and it's hard to do both at the same time. You can't annotate with all the reference materials and be standing in front of the DNC, or whatever. Yeah.
But the advantage of writing is that it's very easy to, if not go viral, at least people can make copies, and it's so easy to take down videos, and people usually don't download videos, but they do save written information. So I'm arguing it shouldn't be an either or. At least I think you should make available your old writings.
Yeah, I am going to sit down and do that. It's just the time.
Yeah.
And I did a online report. I did a consolidated thing called the Webb report, which is 7 videos that summarizes all 4,000 that I've done in 3.5 years. So
are all 4,000 videos available today?
Yeah. What I do is I take the ones that are the least watched, and then let's say it's a 10-minute video. I'll cut that down to 1 minute of the most important newsy thing that happened in that 1 minute, and then I'll just load it up with all the references and proofs.
That's clever.
So that you'll see that as over time the videos will go down, but then these proof summaries will just pile up, and they already are piling up. So I agree with you, though. It probably needs to be a book that just has A, B, C, D, F, G kind of, through this whole thing. Yeah.
And again, where do they find you?
So it's George Webb. You can just say George Webb on YouTube, and I'll come up. You can say George Webb coronavirus, and it'll find me. That's probably the easiest way to find me.
But no website today.
I had spy ring in Congress, but again, got hacked. It was a blog, and there's a lot of research materials. Other channels do research and chat on what I do. Mark Kulak has a channel. KZ Diggs is his reference site. So KZ is the first and last letters of his name, and then digs.com for a lot of the characters to write for quick bios.
Clever.
We're doing.
So you cooperate with a bunch of people.
Yeah, and like we're coming out with a card game, a bioweapon card game. So there's 52 players in the deck of cards. You can learn all of the players. Yeah,
that's brilliant.
Yeah. So the card game is just finishing now. And then we just give you the deck, the GIF files, and then you can just print them at Walmart for 9 cents a card, like photos. And so they're really, they came out great. Had a nice graphic artist put together all the cards. So it's
super clever, man.
Yeah. So it's going to be good. It's going to be fun. I'll send you a pack.
Oh yeah, great. Hey, to those, I cut you off when you were trying to vet yourself, to disclaim, but I just want to say problem. It's the old thing. The proof is in the eating of the pudding, or judge the trees on the leaves or on the fruits. So always these stupid claims. Oh, Assange is an asset. He is an asset. That is an asset. Okay. It's very easy. If someone is making lots of money and being propped up and being like a superhero, yes, then you can suspect them of being compromised. But if someone is having trouble getting their stuff out, they're being undermined, they're being hacked, they're being smeared, that's the
right.
Someone who's sitting like Assange years after year in isolation, that's not someone who, that's the proof of the pudding, if you see what I mean. And that goes Perfect. For you too. Listen to George's information, verify what he's saying, and that's it. Then you don't have to care.
Right. And I'll just say this straight out. I have talked to people in the intelligence business as sources, but that doesn't mean I'm an intelligence agent or an operative or getting a check from CIA or anything like that.
Obviously.
Or Mossad or whatever. No,
exactly.
I've never taken a check from Israel. I've never taken a check from any intelligence agency. And the other thing about, I still defend Barack Obama. I voted for Obama twice. So I try to play it down the middle of the road. I think you have to look at everybody's good and bad. So that's my thing.
Yeah, no, I agree. We have the same with Peter Levenda, another regular guest we have. He has been deliberately delving into the deep and the dark. And in order to do that, you need connections, right?
Sure.
So he's connected with anything from, old-time Nazi war criminals to weird bishops. So he has to, and because of his connections with intelligence, people try to smear him. But very often, I think some of these trolls are actually paid operatives.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And is that Lavender? Lavender?
Well, people mistakenly call him that, but it's lavender.
Lavender.
So it's not it's not lavender, but lavender.
Okay.
And he has a lot of credit as an investigative journalist like you. So he's been delving into many weird and dark things. Mm-hmm. No, but I always have to make that disclaimer because today there's so many people who can't distinguish. So
yeah.
Making them aware that we're aware and debunking it at the offset means that they can't just use it. If they're honest actors, because otherwise the comments will come and they will say it in the comments field,
Sure, if people want to hear, they don't want to hear I'm not in that, and so. Yeah. But I've only worked being a computer software and hardware salesperson in my whole career before I decided to do this, and I just saw corruption happening at a local level in my state. And I kept following the money 20 years ago, and it kept leading higher and higher all the way to a worldwide organization. So with Evergreen Aviation and drugs and Jeff Epstein. So that's how I got into this. So that goes back a long ways. That's my motivation. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio, not Tel Aviv. So, there's a lot of people who make more out of the Israel connection than is there. I do like Bibi Netanyahu. A lot of people hate Bibi Netanyahu, but I do.
Yeah, I'm one of them.
Yeah. And that's okay. We're going to disagree on certain things, but I think there are some really dangerous people.
Even worse?
Oh, yeah. Like Danny Rothschild.
Yeah, right.
And I'm talking about diverting weapons and using the girls to divert the weapons and I'm talking about nuclear weapons. So, and chemical, biological weapons. So, Netanyahu is not in that category yet, I don't think. And I don't believe in a greater Israel. But yeah, I believe Israel has a right to exist and have an intelligence service like everybody else. I do believe that Israel has a right to defend itself against people like Iran who say death to Israel and we're going to push all the Israelis into the ocean. But, so I am pro-Israel. I'll be honest with that. But you got to be pro something, right? And so.
But I see intelligence agencies like this. If you are heirs and ice on the ground, what's going on, that's fair because that's consuming information and sending it up to people who has to take decisions, and that's what it should be about. But then you have this other aspect of intelligence, which is, I guess you can call it social engineering, psychological warfare, operations where they're shaping, like CIA is famous of doing, right? Where they're trying to influence and well, let's say, screw with society and people, like they do in this case with bioweapons. That's the part and that's taken completely over.
Yeah. And see, I get accused of being a social engineer. And I say, are you sure you don't want to focus the energy on Fauci and Strzok and people who are actually causing the whole economy to shut down? So those are the social engineers. And I totally agree with you. The CIA was supposed to be eyes and ears only, no hands, no bloody hands. But that's what it turned out to be. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess that wraps it up, George.
Very well. Now, what part of Norway are you in, just out of curiosity?
Right now I'm in the eastern part, not far from, closer to Sweden actually. But I am from the west. Have you been in Norway?
No. I've been to Sweden, but I haven't been to Norway, unfortunately. I want to go.
You should, if we are ever allowed to go anywhere again. But Norway is like the special thing with Norway is the nature, and the special thing with the nature is that because, Iceland, Denmark, Finland, and Sweden, those 4 countries have each their distinguished nature, very different from each other. The thing with Norway is that it has all those 4 in the same country. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, I'm very grateful for your time and your endless, almost autist level information. And I hope it's been, it's been entertaining and clarifying for my listeners too.
Yeah, great. And I can't wait to hear how it turns out when it's all said and done. I'd love to do the show again. And I'd love to have you on our show so we can see your face and all that. If that's a part of the plan.
I'm very stealthy, man.
Okay, I understand. Okay, Norway Anonymous.
Maybe we can see.
Are you Norway Anonymous?
I'm in Norway. Yes.
I didn't ask you that.
Pardon? What was that?
Norway Anonymous.
Oh, I have partaken in Anonymous.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay, let me come clean without incriminating myself, I hope. When they took down Assange, there was this just amazing coalescence. I think it was the first time it was very publicly visible that all the players are cooperating. So the banks tried to isolate WikiLeaks, PayPal, you remember, everyone just attacked WikiLeaks at the same time, as if it was like a gun went off and said, bam, now attack. And there was an anonymous campaign to attack these institutions back then, and I may or may not have partaken in that.
Well, I know some folks in Norway Anonymous, and so
that's great.
Anyway, life goes on. We'll talk about that on the next show.
We'll do. Super.
All right.
Let that be the cliffhanger.
All right, well, Al. Well, I appreciate it very much. It was fun.
Yeah, it was. And George, it's very important the work you do.
Yeah,
I really
that.
respect. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So God bless you, man.
All right.
Yeah, take care.
You take care.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so far with George today, but like we implied in the show, another is beckoning. Now, I finally realized I have to start educating the YouTube segment of my listeners, because there are so many misunderstandings leading to needless frustration and honestly unfair criticism of us. And of course it's on me, because I'm just assuming people know how stuff is, when I realize there's no way for them to know unless they really pay attention and investigate it. So let me put it very straight how we do these things. Bella tells you in every show that all our main programs are free. And they will remain free, okay? So when some people see that we announce shows only accessible at our websites for subscribers, by the way, are people who donate to us. If you donate a minimum of $1 a month, you have access. You can sign up and then log in, and you will find per today probably over 20 shows not released to YouTube yet. Now some people get annoyed. Oh, you're withholding. Oh, you're only into this for the money. Oh, this is unfair. And I appreciate the frustration, because it means you're actually so into our shows that you get angry from not having access to them. So you're coming from the right place, bro. But every show is free and will eventually be flushed out to YouTube. There's two reasons they're not immediately flushed out. The original reason is that we want to retain like about 5 shows at any given time, so that we have an incentive for folks to chip in and then get access. Because, let's face it, not everyone does this from the idealism place, and so if we can get some of those greedy cheapskates to chip into by getting access to more of it, fine, we'll do that. At least it beats what most of the other shows do, which is retain entire parts too, etc., or just full shows never coming out in the public. Okay? So before you bitch on us, start criticize them for that. If you do that, you're consistent. So this is why I have to explain, no, it's not that we don't want them out there. We just need to keep at any given time 5 shows. Now, why are there over 20 shows? Probably more, I haven't counted. Well, that's to do with the enormous resource demanding process of actually getting stuff out to YouTube, because YouTube demands videos, and to make videos is time consuming. So by all means criticize that, but not until you've started making videos for us. Then you're in a position to criticize. So unless you want to chip in with your work, then shut up about that. So we had a little marathon in the beginning of 2020. I think it was March, I think. And we're going to have more marathons to get more shows out, because the bottleneck is starting to become ridiculous. But the good news here is that you can actually access more shows than what we managed to get out on YouTube so far. You can do that by checking out a podcast platform. And I don't care if you use iTunes, Apple, Spotify, the new Joe Rogan haven, or Google Podcasts, or whatever they are all called. I myself use as a platform Podbean, but you don't have to use that. You can use any, like I said. So do that. If you go there, you'll find probably 10 pre-releases, as we call them. They are pre-releases as long as they're not out on YouTube, because that's traditionally been our main platform. We'll see what the future brings. If YouTube really is a sinking ship finally, then we have no qualms of joining the other rats, leaving it. But so far it is, and yeah. Why the podcast and not YouTube? Well, because podcast platforms are audio only, so it takes nothing to just get something up there. I'm sure you can see that logic. So, no, throw no stones. We are not blackmailing you. We do try to get everything out, and everything will come out eventually. You just have to be patient. And if you're not patient, fine. Throw $1 away, buy us a coffee, and you can get everything today. So that's it. That's why. It's nothing to do with milking. I remember, people couldn't wait for the Antarctica updates with Cliff High, and the same with Farrell's Ancient War in Heaven series and so on. We see this often. Some shows are extremely popular and people want immediate access. And I know it's harsh times. It is harsh times. So I don't blame you for not affording donating. There are people who can't donate because they can't afford it. Then there's people who can't donate because they have no means to. I mean like practical means, not money. But they have no credit card or whatever, or they're boycotting PayPal. Fair. That's totally fair. We've had people send us money in the post. I don't recommend that as a first solution. And there are those who use crypto, and I'm happy to announce that we finally have crypto. We can receive, I think, in 10 different cryptocurrencies. So if you go to our website, you'll see details about it there. But yeah, it's hard times, and I don't blame you. So go to our podcast platform if you want more shows than what's on YouTube. But do remember to subscribe. I'm not asking anyone to donate. It's more important that you have food on your table. But I am asking you to subscribe. There's no excuse not to subscribe. I usually say if you listen to one show, fine, you're off the hook. If you listen to 2 or more, there's no excuse. Do subscribe, whether it be YouTube, where you will be unsubscribed often by the algorithm. So make sure you are subscribed there too, and clicking the bell, of course. Otherwise, there's no point. And on the podcast platform, we need to get the numbers up. If we had huge numbers in subscription, that could alleviate some of what we lack in monetary contributions. But we're really below the par on both. We have people asking us why do we have so few? I can't answer that. Well, I can actually, and I do. But I'll not tire you down with that explanation here and now. But it's really on you to answer it in one way. And people just expect a show like ours to have a much, much bigger following. But that can happen if you yourself subscribe. It will help getting it out there due to it influencing the algorithm. And the same if you share, of course, as Cliff tells us in our pending show with him called Secrets of the Digital World. Check that out. It's exciting stuff. Okay, I hope I've made the case clear now. So you understand how it goes. I'm sorry I have to keep repeating this in many future shows until we've covered the most diversity in topic shows so that we know we reach as many of a different segment of diverse listeners as we have. And, in these hard times, there's a lot of fear. And many people, when they hear the stuff that George today was telling us about, they really can't handle it. That's in fact why the consensus wave has never been greater than it is today. People were more system critical back in the 70s. So it's horrible. And it's just because people can't handle it emotionally. I'm not taking anything away from fair criticism of real conspiracy theory nuts. But this demonization of conspiracy theory as a guise for trying to smack down power criticism and any kind of real old school journalism really is getting out of hand. And they couldn't get away with it if it wasn't for so many neurotic people being full of fear. And it doesn't help when we get in a crisis. You see that in the Trump derangement syndrome. Now, I'll join any queue that are lashing out criticism to the Trump administration any day of the week. But it has to be real substantial criticism and not this bull Trump derangement syndrome thing that actually does nothing other than benefit him in the end. So those suckers who fall into that, they really are giving him a hand, if anything. But to you people who are riddled with fear, Marie Curie, the French scientist who really gave her life for researching cures. So she said, nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. So amen to that, and I'm reminded of the old Persian adage, this too shall pass. So it's important that we can't be children. We can't, on the one hand, wait for a savior. I don't care if you think the savior is Trump or any other politician, and we cannot be so infantile that we can't handle exploring reality and the darker aspects of it. Just a few years ago, actually, there would be no problem having shows like what we have today. But nowadays, it doesn't fly. It's not popular anymore. People don't want, they need their fix, the authoritarian fix, which is why I think we're heading for fascism. So many countries in the world are. Unless the populace wake up and are good with changes and start embracing changes and start being in the vanguard of pushing changes, because changes won't be bad if enough good people are on it. But if you back the suppressive powers that be, we're going to continue the drip change into a much worse place. And these reactions you see towards that power abuse is just the last wriggling of those few who are aware enough to protest. Even when the protests are bullshit and people are buying into bull, it's still healthy that their default reaction is not to automatically buy into everything the authorities are telling them. It's better that you err on the side of a conspiracy hypothesis than you err on the side of the coincidence theories, which are exploited to suppress you further. So have some stamina, and not always are the changes for the better, and it's hard to say where we're going from here. Often when you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else. In fact, I say always. So let's see where this leads. But remember, people, everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And that golden reminder came from none other than the sage John Lennon. Okay, thanks for checking into the forum today. And because of your support and my excellent team, I'm continuing to be your host, Al, remaining yours sincerely. Be seeing you.
Who is number one?